What up? What up? It's the man Sean P coming in live. This is the Sean P Experience live on YouTube, man. I have a very, very incredible special Sunday evening edition, man. I am so honored and excited having a fan moment right now. I have an incredible spoken word artist here on the platform. I got my brother Obbie West is in the building, man.
Hey, thank you for having me, brother. I really appreciate you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. In the official introduction for those that don't know, tonight we are joined by a voice that doesn't whisper truth. It stands at attention and delivers it. Obbie West, international spoken word artist, author of the acclaimed poetic collection Blossom, and a retired U.S. Army veteran originally from Los Angeles. From global classrooms to dimly lit stages, he uses poetry as both a mirror and a megaphone, tackling mental health, healing, and hard conversations with an uncut, straightforward fire that leaves audiences leaning forward. Please welcome the poet, educator, and the advocate, Obbie.
Again, bro, thank you. I appreciate you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So
Yeah.
this podcast is called Sitting with the Griots podcast, the paying homage to the griots of our African ancestry, the storytellers. How do you feel about being called a modern day griot?
Um, it's large shoes, right? When you look at the people who have been referred to as a griot before me, for me, it's one of those titles that I'll, I'm grateful when others say it, but I won't assume it for myself, right? You won't hear me say it, just out of the large amount of regard that I have, again, for the people prior to me that held that same name. But I don't shun it when people say it. I'm absolutely grateful.
Do you feel a large responsibility of being a storyteller for the future generations? Do you feel any kind of like, man, I got to carry this thing on my shoulders, man?
No, not at all. I think once we inherit that responsibility, it starts to feel like homework. You know what I mean? And then we may have a tendency to start tackling topics that we really don't have an innate feeling about because we feel like we got to address everything that's happening. So I think the biggest task for most of us is just to remain who we are, remain authentic to ourselves. Right? I didn't when I first started this, I didn't start saying I got to be the voice for anyone. I just was myself, and innately or naturally throughout that happened, right? So I think the key is just to keep being myself and don't change anything.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, first of all, thank you for your service. You are retired U.S. Army veteran. I'm a veteran myself, U.S. Navy. But my
Again,
question is, how did your experiences there shape your writing and the way you approach difficult conversations?
great question. Two-part answer. It shifted my writing because anytime the more vast your experiences are, then the more you're gonna have to pull from when it's time to write. Right? They say that most human only use, I don't know what it is, a small percentage of our brain or something like that. I'm a firm believer that world experiences, expanding beyond the place where you was conceived or born, is what unlocks those other areas of our brain that we don't have access to. We start to see things, different perspective. We start to be exposed to different ways of life, and then our mind broadens. And with that broadening comes more to address when it comes to writing. So that's how it broadened my writing as far as addressing taboo or sensitive topics. Um, what's going to happen? You know what I mean? Like I grew up in the mud. You spend time in the military and you experience real life events where you wake up in the morning, you leave the fob, and then you come back on the fob with two, three less people than you left with, right? When you the least of my concerns is talking about something. You know what I'm saying? So there's things in society that I'm passionate about that needs to be addressed. I feel like as long as something is kept silent, then it'll never be like even our households. We can simplify this to the smallest scale. In our households, we have a significant other and we have an issue with something, the way that person is carrying on, and we never say anything because we want to save face. As long as we don't say anything, that problem persists. And as soon as we decide to hold a conversation about it, then we start seeing an adjustment made, right? Same thing in the world. As long as we don't talk about things, those problems will persist. So because of that. I just say it. I mean, what whoever gonna do?
Yes, sir. So did the structure of the military life clash with your creative side, or did it actually shape it?
Both. It shaped it in the way aforementioned. It shaped it in the way that I spoke about earlier, where it just allotted me experiences that gave me more to pull from. It hindered it in a way that I wasn't able to go out and operate in that space as much because I had an obligation to this. So I can't be at all the poetry venues I want to be at and all those type of things. So it hindered it in that way. But it was one of those things to where it happened the way it was supposed to. It's kind of like just be patient, just keep pulling in the experiences, pulling in the experiences. Then when you do cut ties from this thing, you'll have everything you need in order for you to show up in the way that you want to. So it was all about patience.
Yes,
The
sir.
hinder,
Yes,
it
sir.
was
I
hindered
love
was necessary.
Yes, sir. I love to ask my guys this question. How did you first come into the world of writing, fall in love with words, and then realize the freedom of expressing yourself that way? How did it all start for you?
Great question. It started kind of unexpectedly. Yeah, very unexpectedly. I never was, I didn't even have a very in depth exposure to poetry early on in life. Where I grew up, nobody was talking about or partaking in poetry. It was rap. We hip hop heads. I grew up in South Central LA. We listened to, you know what I mean? And we didn't associate that to poetry. We thought poetry was roses are red, violets are blue, and all that kind of stuff. It was poetry was what you learned at school. And nobody was talking about that. Later on in life, 31 years old, is when I was exposed to spoken word. And when I saw the difference between spoken word and what I thought was poetry, there was this attachment to it for several reasons. First, I was always attracted to very colorful articulation, just creative ways to say things. You know what I mean? I grew up listening to E40. You know what I mean? Where you don't just say what you mean. You say it in a very
Yeah, you
colorful.
gotta.
And
Yeah,
then you can let the listener figure it out. I grew up on the West Coast, where everybody speaking code. So
yeah.
just full articulation was very attractive to me. And then it was permission to address things that normal conversation didn't really give you the space to address, right? Like I can talk to you about something, you might have an adverse opinion about it. So you might rebut what I'm saying. You may cut me off, you may do anything. But when you're on a stage, those people paid to come be quiet. So it allows me to have this one-way conversation with a group of people who are eager to listen. And then I can express things a little bit more freely. And it felt like a safe space. So for all those reasons combined, I tried it and never left.
So before putting the pen to the paper, seriously, man, who are some of the poets that you admired or looked up to, and what was it about their work that spoke to you?
Yeah, admired. There was a lot of poets who I looked at who was very inspiring to me. I started doing poetry in Killeen, Texas. In Killeen, Texas, they had KPS, Killeen Poetry Slam. And that was just a conglomerate of high echelon writers, right? You had Christopher Michael, you had Faressa, you had Fatodi, you had Shake the Poet, you had Crow, you had all these people, and they all inspired me. They were all great in their own way, right? So everybody pretty much had me in awe. The first person that I really, really attached myself to was Talam AC. And this was before I ever met him. Somebody gave me one of his CDs, and I started listening to the CDs and then watching him on YouTube. And the way he did what he did just absolutely aligned with my taste. So that was the first person that I just kind of clinged to, almost to a fault. You know what I mean? And then, yeah, to a fault to where I would sound like him and do my hand the way he did his hand, and I had to break away from that, right? And then there was the next person. Her name is Candace Liger. Candace was a poet that I met in Oklahoma City, and she and I got real close. And it was just very, very. It was just really. Candace is like one of those geniuses that she gonna do one or two things. She either gonna do great for herself and take over the world, or she's going to create World War IV. Right? She's one of those people that she's so genius that she can go to either extreme. You know what I
That sounds
mean?
like Kanye West a little bit, little Kanye.
That's exactly how it is. Yeah, and her writing resembled that. So.
Yeah, yeah. Was there a moment where you knew poetry could be more than just a simple pastime or a hobby? You realized it could be more than that.
Did out the gate. Once I saw KPS doing it and learned that they were professional poets, they would have these shows where they would bring people in. They would fly them in from other locations. And in my mind, anytime that somebody's flying you in from another location for you to stand in front of a bunch of people and talk for 15 minutes, it can be a living, right? So because of the way I was introduced to poetry and because of the group who introduced me to it, it showed me out the gate that it can actually be. Now how much of a living, that's per the person and how you use it, but they did show me that it could be way more than a hobby.
So in doing my research, I did join your platform, man. Amazing platform you have. And you
Thank
have
you.
something called the Brain Dump series. What
Yeah.
sparked it, and what do you hope your audience gain from you doing your Brain Dump series?
The Brain Dump series was more selfish than it was for the audience, right? I'll tell you
Okay.
what the Brain Dump series was. Back to, and this is going to lead or go back to one of your previous questions. When I was in the military, I did way more writing than I did presenting because my time was dedicated. You know how it is when you're in the military, your time is dedicated to that. But I would write at a heavy pace. So you got all these poems that's just piling up, and I never did anything with it. It got to the point to where I would forget that they exist. Right? I would just write it, give it a title, save it in my phone, and 2, 3 months later, I forget it exists. That's how many poems it was. So I didn't want those poems to just go untouched without ever being birthed publicly. So I created the Brain Dump series, which is pretty much me taking all this old stuff from the past and just dumping it out. Right. So I created this thing where there was about 3 poems per episode, and it was just called the Brain Dump series. And so that's what that was. So it was just me being able to, get that
Get it
off of
out.
my. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So did creating this series change the way you approach other poems like, going forward?
It did. When I created the series is when I started trying to capture poetry, not just deliver it in an artistic way, but capture it in an artistic way from a cinematic standpoint. So that gave me a broader view of how poetry can look. You know what I mean? Versus it just being on a stage in front of a mic. There's visuals that we can align with this to actually enhance what we're saying. So the Brain Dump series allowed me to tap into that. And then from there, it was like, okay, this thing is pretty endless. The potential is pretty endless.
Yes, sir. This show is always aiming to be educational. A lot of writers watch this show, and a lot of would-be writers, up-and-coming writers. I love going into the actual craft of this. So, give us a sneak peek into your writing process from the blank page to a stage-ready piece. What's that journey like for you?
Right. That's it's funny you asked. Just recently, I was writing a poem called Writing Process. And the poem is part of uh, a group, a family of poems that'll later be released on an album called The Interview. And there's a person asking questions. And one of the questions was, what is your writing process? But I'm answering these questions through poem. So now I have to answer that question. And it was a struggle for me to sit down and write that poem because I can't identify a process, right? A process is something that happens by the numbers, right? Say, for instance, if it was the process of me um, watering my plants, right? There's a process where I'm going to take the moisture device and I'm going to test the soil and make sure it needs to be watered. And then from there, I'm going to water the plant. I'm going to sit it in something, a drainage pot, just by the numbers. Where writing for me isn't like that. It's just existing. It's like if somebody asks you, what's your breathing process? What's your process to inhale? Explain to me how you inhale. You're probably not going to
I
be able to
can't.
do it.
I
You just
can't.
do it. And
You just do it.
and that's how it is. It's just like inhaling, man. As long as I'm existing, I hear messages. I may be talking to you, and you may say something, and this is what you meant, but this is the way that message resonated with me. The
Yeah.
exact same words, right? You was talking about somebody being blind; they physically couldn't see, but I heard or I saw some blinds that was keeping somebody from seeing. You know what I'm saying? The
Yes,
window
sir.
You was talking about being medically blind, and I'm thinking window blinds. So now a line comes to mind, and now I'm interested in exploring that line further. So I'll write that one line down with no direction, and then I'll hear the next line. I'll hear the next line. By the fifth, sixth line, the poem starts taking its own direction, and then once I think it's a completed thought, I give it a title and I save it, and then that's it.
We have some poets in the chat, man. We have some poets in the room. So my sister asked, do you think that children should all be required to take a poetry class, or should it just be an elective for those who show interest? So should it be mandatory or an elective? Good question.
That is a good question. I don't have a, if I say it should be, that would be my bias
Yeah.
speaking, right? But I don't have a basis for saying why it should be mandated. But I will say this, if we had to take something out and replace something, I would say let's get rid of, I'm gonna be honest, I like science. We in school dissecting roaches. I ain't never grew up and had to dissect no roach, you know what I mean?
Right. Right.
All my life, I
Right.
had to be able to figure out how to articulate. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? How to say things based on the space I was in so that that target
Yeah.
audience can understand what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
if we had to take something out and replace it, I would say replace science with poetry. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Look
Okay.
at it different from English class. English
Yeah.
tells us how to use the English language. Poetry tells us how to be emotionally expressive, how to turn the way you feel into words. So don't combine
Yeah.
those, make them separate, and let's get rid of science. That's what I
Yeah.
would say.
One of my fellow author friends, her name is Emily, and she has a book called Bibliotherapy in the Bronx. And she uses poetry, spoken word, hip hop to help children and adults with their mental health issues and things of that nature, man. So I think the
Yeah.
more I look at things like that, I wish that they taught us that in school.
Hmm.
I would have passed that class. I would have aced that. Like I wasn't worried about
Right.
stereotypical English class. But
Hmm.
if they were breaking down Biggie Smalls or Tupac when I was in school, I'd have been like, I would have been
Absolutely.
more invested in that class.
Yeah. Right. Likewise. Yeah.
So my brother asked, what's the process for cutting the weeds? So I guess the process of cutting down things to get that final product. What's the process?
Yeah, for me, that's just rereading it. I never have a proofreading session where I write a poem and then I go back and say, let me proofread. Because proofreading is normally most effective with a separate set of eyes. If I'm
Okay.
proofreading the thing I just wrote, I'm going to read over the mistake that I just put it because I'm not going to even, you give it to somebody else and immediately like that spelled wrong. You know what I mean? So proofreading is normally best served with a separate set of eyes. So for me, what that looks like is I just write it and leave it alone. Now, 6 months later, 8 months later, maybe a year later, I might be looking through my catalog of poems trying to figure out which one I want to do for this feature. And I'll see that poem and I'll reread it. But now I'm 8 months, a year removed. My eyes are like a new set of eyes at that point because I'm that far removed from when I wrote it. So now I'm seeing all the things that I would have done different. Like these are too many filler words. I can complete the same message by taking out these 4 words and just combining these same message, shorter word. Then I start seeing it. So for me, getting rid of the fluff is just me disassociating or detaching from the work for a period of time and then going back after I've pretty much forgot about it. At that point, I feel like I'm reading it from a third person's point of view. And now I can see the stuff I wouldn't have saw before.
I noticed going through a lot of your work, for days, going through your work, hours, going through your work. You use a lot of alliteration in your writing, a lot of alliteration. Is that like a real purpose thing you do, or it just happens to be that way?
Bro, I tried to not do it.
You try to not do it?
I tried to not do it. And it
That's
just,
crazy.
yeah, it is not intentional at all. I never say, let me rewrite this line with alliterations. That's just the way it comes out. And one time I was conscious of, I said, let me try to write a poem without it. And it just wouldn't happen. That's just how I hear the messages. So that's never been an intent. I think I may have started doing that before I knew what an alliteration was.
I love that answer, man, because again, my friends and I, we always breaking down hip hop bars and poets and stuff. I think a lot of times these guys not aware of the devices that they're using when they're doing it. They just it
I,
sounds good to them like this, and then we break it down like, oh, they using this, they using that, they using this. Like they didn't do it on
I
purpose, really, you know.
think those artists, they learn more about their work from listening to y'all break it down than they knew themselves. Yeah.
That's crazy. That's crazy. So back to the whole school concept. My idea was let's reverse engineer it and let's teach high school kids these devices on purpose so they can use it with the purpose. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. I think it also gives them more of an option when it comes to, because traditionally we're all fed the same profession. When we was growing up, everybody was saying be a lawyer or a doctor. That was just, everybody was saying the same thing. And I think when you start teaching these students this art form and creative ways that they can use it, one, it allows a lot of people going through stuff in their households and they don't have a way to talk about it. You give them this, now they have a way to talk about it, and it broadens their perspective when it comes to profession and what they want to get into later and how they want to use it. I was looking at National Geographic the other day, and there was a body of water, and there was these wild dogs trying to get through the water. The water was too deep for the wild dogs, but there was two lionesses who was able to run through the water with no problem. They were sisters. And the narrator said, the water is too deep for the wild dogs, but the lionesses sink perfectly. So he used the word sink as a double entendre to where it meant SINK and SYNC, right? A poet probably wrote the narrative for National Geographic, and we don't even know that that's who's behind that.
Man, that's crazy.
You know what I mean? So there's
That's
more
crazy.
to it than us just standing on the stage with a mic. Nike commercials, poets write a lot of those narratives for Nike commercials. So I think when you introduce that early, you start broadening people's horizons of how they can use it. And
Man,
then,
I love you saying that. I was on a different podcast a couple hours ago. We had an audio narrator that read
yeah,
audio books, but I was talking about how many things exist for your voice besides just books, like
right.
commercials, of course, uh, museums and exhibits have a voice. Press the little button, voice.
Hmm.
So, so many ways to use the voice outside of just reading books, right? Like you
Right.
said,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
many ways. Um, so most writers always swear you got to be a great reader to be a great writer. What kind of things do you love to read that influence your writing?
I don't I don't attach the two. Like I don't read in order to become better at writing. I just read because whatever it is that I picked up, I think it feeds me. And inherently, I think it helps the writing because now I use a Kindle because Kindles, I can get on an airplane with 50 books in a Kindle. I can touch a word that I don't know what it means and a definition pops up versus me having to have a dictionary and go. So it starts exposing me to words I didn't know what they meant. So now the vocabulary broadens. So now you have more ways to say things. So I don't intentionally attach the two, but inherently through reading. So the type of books that I normally read is self-help books, and I like psychology. I like the way human behavior. So stuff that, why are we doing that type of thing? So those are the type of books I normally indulge in.
Funny you mentioned that. I'm a psychology major. Since
Okay.
I love behavior and
Yeah,
dealing with things like that. And like a lot of your pieces, again, once again, dealing with advocating for different things and dealing with relationships and all those things.
yeah.
How do you think your mental health or psychology interest, how does that fuel your pieces that you have?
I think anytime you enter the psychology of things, then you're naturally curious, right? And whenever you're curious, you're gonna you're gonna have more information than a person who's not. And the more information you have, the more there is to put into these poems. So to me, just always being curious of why. Like I watch a lot of crime TV for that reason. I want to know why these serial killers think like this. Why, you know what I mean? And I think it just gives you a ton of insight. You got a lot of different angles you can write from. I don't watch so many serial killers documentaries. I don't wrote from the perspective of a serial killer, right? I don't. So there's when you start to indulge in these things out of curiosity, it gives you another perspective that you can write from. So I think that's how me being interested in psychology has helped me when it comes to writing.
Now, a lot of writers always talk about the infamous writer's block, hitting that wall. What do you use to help you push past the writer's block wall?
Mhm. I don't even believe in it. I think I wrote a line in a poem that says something about karate chop writer's blocks into small bars or something like that. So I don't. It's just one of those things to where I feel like It's like ghosts. Once you believe in it, then you give it the power to exist, right? Um, writer's block, I feel like, exists when you're trying to force something. Say, for instance, if I have a topic that I've started writing on, and when I started writing, I was in that headspace. So the information was coming pretty fluently. And then my energy changed for whatever reason. Maybe I went away from it for a day and came back, and now I'm in a different headspace, but I want to finish it. So you start trying to force the rest of it and you get stuck, right? I think that's where the block comes from. But if you explore yourself and say, well, what headspace am I in now? And go start writing that aligns with that headspace, you'll be writing again, in my opinion. So I think writer's block happens when you're trying to force content that doesn't align with your headspace. But if you just write based on where you currently are energetically, then I think you'll have something to say. Um, I think writer's block can also stem from trying to limit yourself to within certain topics, right? Like, I'm only going to write about Black social justice. I'm only going to write about, I think that can create a block. But if you say, I'm going to write about anything that's happening in the world, shit, where the hell is the block going? It's too much. You know what I'm saying? It's too much stuff. So I think just not limiting yourself to certain subjects and not trying to force something that doesn't align with the space that you're in. And I think that you'll learn that eventually your pen will start moving.
Now, this is my favorite go-to question for you. How do you advise up-and-coming poets to approach memorizing their work for performing? So I watched one of your things. You did like a 30-minute set, it seemed like. You was just going with these pieces. You would
Yeah,
finish one, and you'd be like the next piece of five, four, three, two. You was just going for like 30 plus minutes. I'm thinking to myself, like, that's a lot of material. Like, how you memorize all of that?
it's just diligence, man. It's diligence, and it's also when we write something. I don't know. This happens with us when we write something. We try to remember it verbatim versus just remembering the message. We even try to remember the words that don't matter, like is and you can swap those out with sounds as long as you capture the meat of that message and still get it out. So I don't put the pressure on myself to remember everything verbatim. That's when you start stumbling over words, trying to go back and repeat a line just because you said ain't instead of is not. You know what I mean? Say ain't and keep moving. You know what I'm saying? So I think one is that I don't try to force myself to memorize verbatim. And two, is really no tricks. It's just one line. It's when I first started doing pull-ups, I could do two pull-ups. And then I was able to do six. And then I was able to do 10. And then I was able to do like 18. Then I got up to like 25. And it was just, I kept doing the same thing until my muscle said, you know what? He ain't going to stop trying. So let me just develop the strength to do it anyway. It's the same thing with memorization. When I first started trying to memorize, it would take me 2 weeks to memorize a 3 minute poem. And then at 2 weeks went down to a week. Now that's 30 minutes. You know what I mean? It was just diligence. I think what tends to happen is whenever something is frustrating in the beginning, we ditch that way and try to go to another way. Oh, this ain't working. Let me go to this way. And then that don't work in 30 minutes. This ain't working. You got to stick with something long enough for it to start working. So for me, it's one line at a time. I memorize a line, then I'll say the next line. And then I say the next line. Then I say all three together. And then I say the next line. And then after that, I introduce distraction, where after the words are memorized and I no longer need the pen, now I do it while I'm vacuuming. I do it while I'm in the shower. I do it while I'm listening to music because that's going to help prepare me for when the person at the bar is in there shaking ice while I'm on stage trying to recite a poem, or when somebody walk in late and they talking loud, like it's going to prepare me for that. So I think to just work on your poetries in dead silence as a performance artist, you're creating a false expectation for yourself because it ain't gonna be dead silent when you're in that room. So try to mirror the environment that you're working in. And I even notice if I'm memorizing a poem, but I'm always saying it low, like I'm always saying it like this when I memorize it. I'm saying it to myself. I'm saying it to myself. When I say that same poem loud, it's a different feeling. And I start stumbling over words. And I was so however I'm gonna do it on that stage, that's how I need to rehearse. If I'm going to project, then when I'm sitting here on this stool, I project. Look, bro, you see, there's a stool right there. You see, it's another stool over there in the corner. There's a stool. So it's two stools in here. If I sit on the stool that I'm likely going to be using at the show, because it allows me to know which body positions I can assume in that stool versus that everything that show is going to offer, I rehearse that. Memorizing is more than just the words. It's about not being able to be distracted. It's about being able to function while the room is doing whatever the room does. So I create those rooms. And because you got people that got the poem memorized, they said all day in their car with no problem, and then get on the stage and drop it because they didn't prepare for the environment. They just memorized the words. So very long-winded answer, but all those things are important.
Huh. That was wonderful. That was wonderful, man. Do you have any like daily practices or daily drills to recommend to sharpen the craft of writing, performing?
Right?
Right.
Right. Figure out, write about things that you don't normally, that you wouldn't normally think is a poem. Right. I remember going to Walmart and the lady was like, please put your, I was in self checkout and I scanned it and I put it in the bag. And the machine was like, please put your item in the bag. I'm like, motherfucker, it's in the bag. And I took it out the bag, put it back, and like, please put your item in the bag. And I'm getting frustrated, like, it's in the bag. I find myself yelling at a machine. So I came and wrote a poem to the woman that's inside that machine. Like, look, you know what I'm saying? So there's too much going on in life for you to limit yourself. Try to write about those things that you don't think are poems. And if you're into the creative aspect of writing, read the line and ask yourself, what's the likelihood that somebody else would say the same line this way? If there's any chance, rewrite that line in a way that you know nobody would say it. You know what I mean? So I do that. I'll write a line. I'll say, nah, there's about 50 people that would have thought of that. So let me write a line that in a way that if anybody else says they had to have got it from here. So I challenge myself to do those type of things.
I want to get into the world of battle rap, man. In my research, I saw you actually did battle rap. You actually
Yeah,
battled a rapper, right? So before we
yeah.
get into the deep dive on that, give the audience an idea, like what's the difference between slam poetry and the sport of battle rap? I find it very, very similar to my opinion, right? So what's the difference to you?
I think the main difference is you're talking directly to your opponent when it's battle rap. Slam poetry, you're presenting a poem within a short the time. Both have time limits. Um, so they're similar in a lot of ways. I think the only difference is I've even seen slams where it's a one versus one slam, and both slam artists are on the stage at the same time. As soon as this one gets done, this one goes. So I've even seen that dynamic. So the only consistent difference is I'm talking to you and I'm talking about you. You know what I mean? So you can't just pull the same slam poem that you did at the last slam and do it in this one. You have to write specific to that next battle. You know what I mean? So I think that's the difference. Is it forces you to rewrite every time. Yeah.
Uh, my poet sister asked, "Do you think the competitive nature of slam poetry distracts from the art?
I think
The
it very
competitive nature."
yeah, I think it very well can if the artist allows it to. I think when you overindulge or if you get caught up in slam too much and you're not careful, when you watch another poet present, even if it's not a slam, you're not looking at it to enjoy the art. You're looking at it to compare their ability to what you can do. So you're looking at other people from a competitive standpoint when they're not competing, and it takes away from you enjoying the art. And I also think that slam can, just as much as it can sharpen you as an artist, it can deteriorate your value if you allow it to. Right? If you are on these stages and you're never winning, you may start to use that to as a barometer for your own worth. You know what I mean? And I think that that's dangerous. I think poetry is medicinal. And what's in my medicine cabinet, what's in your medicine cabinet is different. What's in your medicine cabinet is perfect for you. Vitamins in mine are perfect for me. So when you have a judge that has one opinion and judging based on their own opinion, it's cool to be a part of that if you just don't take it to heart. But if you start taking that to
Yeah,
assess your own value, that can be extremely dangerous.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think,
I know for myself, doing slams, I speak about this a lot. I know every place probably different. I don't know. But most times it's the most random people that's judging the slams. They just pick out 5 people and they just judging it. But like they're not writers or poets themselves. They just being subjective. So like you said, you can't afford to put a lot of weight into the score because it's like
yeah,
no idea what it took to even write or perform that. They just, 7.5 or 8.2. It's like,
yeah. I think you have to be able to slam for fun. If I people every slam I've seen, there's people who showed up to the slam just to watch it, right? Some of them aren't even into poetry. They was just brought by somebody else. They can't have a relationship with anybody who's slamming. And somebody walks up to a random person and say, "You want to be a judge tonight?" They're like, "Judge what?" And then they explain it to them right quick and they give them a paddle. Some of them have never heard poetry before. So if I'm in that and I have experienced this thing before, and this thing that I experienced was very impactful to my life, and then you do a poem about that thing, you're gonna get a 10 from me. So it's based off of my lived experience, right? That same poem might get an 8.5 in another room. So I think you have to be able to slam for fun and not take it to heart. The other thing about slam is it puts us in a position to we do a lot of talking to ourselves. What I mean by that is you can go to Southern Fry or something like that, right? And you go to Southern Fry, this annual slam competition, and you got all these slam teams, and the audience are other artists, other poets, right? And then you're on the stage and you're talking to other poets. So in that process, how many people have you won over to the art form? I can go in a room that only got 10 people in it, but none of them have heard poetry. I got a chance of winning 10 people over to the art form versus you being in the room just talking to a whole bunch of other poets who already drunk the Kool-Aid. So I think sometimes slam it it limits their ability to talk to the general public. They're only able to be appealing to other artists who understand why you're talking that fast, who understand, you know what I mean? Because slam, I got to get it out in 3 minutes. So I'm talking like this the entire time. And there's people in the audience that understand what I'm saying when I'm talking like this. But if I go in the general public and I'm talking like this, they're going to be like, what the fuck is he saying? You know what I'm saying? So I think if you get too wrapped up in slam, it will ruin your ability to be effective when you're just talking to the general public. And when it comes to poetry, especially when it comes to making a living off poetry, the general public is who needs to understand it. You couldn't take, you couldn't write or present or narrate National Geographics in the same way you do a slam poem.
yes,
So,
sir. Yes, sir.
so to get back to the original question, I would say don't limit yourself to one way of sharing. Right? Still be able to be versatile in how you share a poem. Um, be able to slam for fun and don't use it as a barometer for your own wealth. I mean, your own worth. And lastly, I would say know when to snap in and out of it. Know when you need to look at something from a competitive standpoint versus when you just need to go sit down and enjoy the art.
Yeah, yeah. So back to this battle rap situation you had, man. Like, how did the battle challenge you in ways like writing that's different than other parts of your performance? That particular night, that moment.
Say that one more time.
How did the battle rap preparation, how is that different than your normal prep for a typical, slam or something like a spoken word event?
Yeah, I had to do a lot of lying because I don't even know the dude that I was right, and I had to say stuff about him, a person I don't even know. Where in my poems, it's just from a very, very honest standpoint, whether or not it's my truth or a truth that I've been connected to. This was just all fabrication in an effort to, you know what I mean? So I had to do a lot of lying. I wasn't interested. I still had real life going on while I was preparing for that. So I wasn't finna study this dude. I wasn't finna go look at any of his previous slams. I wasn't finna see what he got going on in his life. So I'm just saying general statements that can apply to anybody, right? So I had to write specific to a person. I had to be okay with doing a little lying or a little fabrication stuff that I know wasn't true. That was pretty much the
Yeah,
biggest difference. But During poems, for me, they're very conversational. I don't know if you saw Joe Budden. He slammed one time. Joe Budden, not slammed, he battled one time
I
against
did.
battle.
I
Okay.
did. Yeah.
Joe Budden, he couldn't win because he couldn't take the rhythm out of it. He couldn't make the raps conversational. It
Yeah.
still sounded like he was on a beat, so it wasn't resonating.
Right. Right.
So for me, poetry is very conversational. So that was an easy transition because battle rap is conversational. You know what I
Yes,
mean?
it is. Yes,
Um,
it is. Yes, it
so
is.
we're similar in a lot of ways and different in a few ways.
So back to memorization, what you were saying about distractions earlier, to me, like when I watch battle rap, like you said, the opponent right there, they sometimes walking around you, are they touching you? The crowd reacting in different ways, like it could really throw you off. I could imagine, like
It,
speak to that.
it can. I think the way you present poetry also helps with that. We get into the habit of presenting poem with a set rhythm. And once we break that cadence,
Yeah,
we get stuck. We don't know where we was at. And we got to go back to the beginning of that stanza
yeah,
and start
yeah,
from there so we can get the cadence back flowing because the cadence is what leads us into the other word. But
yeah,
when you present it in a very conversational way and it's like talking, you prepared to pause at any time because you might want to make eye contact with somebody. You know what I mean? So I think the way that I naturally present poems helped me a lot because there's not a set cadence, there's not a set rhythm. It's just talking. You know what I mean? And so and with it being conversational, delivery is slower. And when your delivery is slower, you're thinking faster than you're talking. So you're able to identify the next word before it's ready for it to be said. When you have a set rhythm and you're trying to stick with that rhythm and you're going fast, now you're talking faster than you're thinking. And there's a more of a likelihood that you're going to forget something. So I was just I was just up there talking.
you did incredibly well. In my personal opinion, you did incredibly well to say that's not your normal universe. You did good, man. I enjoyed it.
I appreciate that. Thanks for taking the time to watch that.
Yeah, for sure. I was going all through the archives, man, trying to do my homework, man.
Yeah.
Let me ask you an interesting question. Do you think battle rap could benefit from having scores like a slam? Because it's so subjective. You'll see a rap battle, and it's like, who won the battle last night? And there's no real actual score to say, well, so and so won the battle. It's pretty much it's subjective.
It's absolutely subjective. It's based on what the crowd think.
Yeah, there's no score in battle rap.
Do I think they would benefit? I think we would benefit from it as the audience because now we get a definite who won and who lost. You know what I mean? We know what our own opinion is, but we want to know what the consensus is. You know what I mean? Who won it? So I think it'll benefit us as the viewer.
Right.
Yeah.
I also tapped into your audio book, Blossom, right? So tell us about your creation of the audio book, why you chose that particular medium and things of that nature. What was that about, that project?
You ever write something during your infantile stages of being part of a thing, like your first poem, and you
Yeah,
go read it today and you're like, ugh, you kind of cringing.
yeah.
That's Blossom. So
Really? That's how you feel about that?
yeah,
I
Blossom.
loved it, man. I
I
loved it.
appreciate that. My daughter wrote a book when she was 15 years old.
Oh, wow.
So I didn't have a book. So I'm like, there's no way I'm not gonna have a book, and she got a book. And she wrote a poetry book. So I wrote Blossom. I wrote Blossom because my daughter had a book, right? That was it. I never aspired to be an author, any of those things. So when I listen to it, I don't feel like I put the intentionality into it that I would have if I was doing it for another reason. You know what I mean? So I feel better about Unstable Man, which is also an album that's on streaming platforms, Spotify. And then I just released an EP called Lecter, LEC, like
Yep,
Animal
yep,
Lecter.
yep. Saw that. Saw that.
So those I feel a little better about. I think I'm gonna feel even better about the interview. As soon as I get off with you, I got to drive to the studio and record this album.
Okay, okay,
Um,
okay.
so that's how that came about. It came about because I was trying to compete with my 15-year-old daughter at the time. And bro, to be honest, I hope this answer doesn't spoil your impression of it, but I didn't put a lot of thought into what point. You know what I put the most thought into?
What?
Put the most thought into the freedom of creating a book that used to exist in a hard copy. Once the
Okay.
hard copy sold out, I never reprinted them. I just left
Oh,
the book. But
okay. Okay.
the freedom in creating that book, like I started doing poetry when I was 31. So the book didn't have page 1 through 30. The first page in the book was page 31 because that's when I started doing poetry. The
I like that.
titles, yeah, the titles for each poem, it wasn't at the top of the page above the poem. It was a watermark in the middle of the page. You had to stare through the letters of the poem to see the title behind it.
Man,
You know
that's
what I
crazy.
mean?
That's
Yeah. So
crazy.
I learned that nobody approves how you read. My daughter wrote a book in all lowercase letters, and nobody. I said, "This is when I realized books ain't shit." Right? She wrote a book. You know what I
My
mean?
God.
We get books when we was younger. When we was younger, they would give us books, right? And then they
Yeah.
would give us a test. The way you
Yeah.
pass the test is to know everything that's in that book. We was
True.
conditioned to believe everything in book are facts. If it's in a book, it's a fact, right? So
True.
now today we pick up books and we read books, and if it says it in a book, we'll adopt it to our lives because it says it in a book. And as a child, if it's in a book, it's a fact. Then my daughter wrote a book and nobody approved it. I'm like, wait, anybody can just write a book. So now I got to be more careful of what I'm intaking. And I got to realize books aren't facts, they're opinions.
Yes.
And some of those opinions may align with me. Some of them may be good opinions, but they don't align with me. Right.
Yes.
So it's a different way to
Yes.
look at books. So when she did that,
Yes.
I was like, oh, I'm going to tear this process up. So that's why I started the book on page 31. I put the title as a watermark in the background. I just broke all the rules of what a
I like that.
traditional book is supposed to look like. So
I
that
like
was
that.
the most,
I
that
like
was
I
the
like those I like those creative choices. I like that freedom of doing that. I like that.
yeah, that was the most thought that I put into the book was that
Right.
part. Yeah.
Right. So besides your brain dump series on your website, I saw you also have your erotic radio series, right?
Yeah.
So tell us about the creation of the erotic series. And I love the ability to speak about this thing that we all know about. But again, like you said earlier, talk about it in so many different colorful ways instead of
Mhm.
the straight, straight front door
Yeah.
way.
Well, first, I don't like reciting erotic poems in public
Yeah, yeah.
because they too hard to get through. You know what I mean?
Okay,
You
okay.
recite an erotic poem and you get a room full of adults. You say one line that's nasty, like whoo, ah, whoo,
Yeah, it is.
whoo.
Yeah,
You got to
yeah,
wait for that to die down, right? So
yeah.
I've stood on stage for 7 minutes trying to recite a 2.5 minute poem, waiting for all that noise. You know what I mean?
That's crazy.
And for me, that's tough because I'm a fan of creative writing. So the front of this sentence and the ending of this sentence, as far as the syllables, it might have a relationship. There might be some similarity in the way these syllables sound as the sentence progresses. But if I
Yeah,
can't get the whole sentence out at
yeah.
once, you're never going to hear that creative relationship.
You can't land the plane. You can't land.
Right? The whole poem is fragmented. So that's one reason I don't like reciting them in public. The other reason is I'm not really a fan of the energy that comes after it. Like if I
Yeah,
recite the type of poems that I want to recite, afterwards there's people that come to me and they look like they've been invested in. They look like they've been helped. They look like they have information that they can go use 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, right?
yeah, yeah.
When I just recite erotic poems, they just look like they're horny. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah,
So at the
right.
end, when the show is over and I'm in the back and I'm greeting people, it's a whole bunch of sexual energy
Yeah,
versus,
yeah,
hey, I've been touched type. So I prefer the I've been touched type energy versus the please come touch me energy. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah,
So I
yeah,
don't recite them in public for those two reasons, but I
yeah.
write them. I'm a very sexual person. So again, if it's part of life, I write about it. So I
Right.
write about erotic poetry. The challenge for me, or not the challenge, but what I challenge myself to do is paint it without saying it. Right? If I
Yes.
showed you a picture of New York and it had a bunch of buildings, a bunch of lights, a bunch of cars, a bunch of people, and I say, describe that picture, but you can't say the word people, you can't say the word lights, you can't say the word car, you can't say the word building. Now you got to describe that picture. That's what I
That,
try to do. So let me describe putting
that's
my
good.
thing inside of it without saying thing, without saying inside, without, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I like that. I like that. That's a gym. That's a gym right there. That's a
Yeah.
gym. That's a
So
gym. Because again, a lot of my friends being writers and they're writing, love scenes, romance books, whatever it might be. It's like hip hop once again, right? Like hip hop for 50 years, mostly been cars, money, clothes, rims. But how could you describe it different? Describe these
mhm,
bricks or describe the rims or whatever without saying,
absolutely.
right?
So that's the challenge for me is I'm intentional about doing that. Now, why the erotic radio show exists is
Yeah.
because I have all these erotic poems and I don't recite them in public, just like the Brain Dump series. I wanted to create a platform to show them. So I use that as a way to share those poems, but I monetized it.
Yes.
So my website for
Yes.
a subscription is $7 a month for a
Yes,
subscription.
sir. Yes,
So
sir.
yeah, that's how that
I
came about.
advise it, man. Definitely plug that. Anybody watching this, I definitely the past week or two I've been binging it like crazy, man. I'm
Yeah,
loving all of it on the site, man. Beautiful site. Beautiful.
appreciate you.
Yes, sir. Before we get out of here, man, one last important question. Why does it seem like poets and comedians can say anything that politicians and pastors can't say? What is it about that art form that gives freedom that other folks can't see to think about these different topics and things like that?
Great question. I feel like when you're a politician, when you're a preacher, when you're people who have been appointed to be in these places, you have to talk in a way that satisfies the people who appointed you. We appointed ourselves. You appointed yourself as a poet. I appointed myself as a poet. Nobody appointed me, so I ain't got a group of people who I have to satisfy. So I think we got a little bit more freedom. When you've been appointed to a position that you have the responsibility to be politically correct and things of that nature. Even I'm an advocate for sexual assault and harassment prevention, so I go in those spaces and I facilitate training on sexual assault and harassment, and all those trainings are facilitated through poetry. The people who hired me, they have a script that they have to go by when they teach those trainings. If they deviate from that, like sapper training, sharp training, if they deviate from what Department of the Army, Department of whoever sent to them, they can get in trouble. But when they hire me, I'm not subject to that script. So now I can talk about the topic a little bit more in depth, and the presentation proves to be a little bit more effective because we're not sugarcoating a sensitive topic. So I'm gonna answer your question, and then I'm gonna give you the reason for the additional narrative. I think we have the freedom to do that because we're self-appointed, so we don't have to satisfy the people who appointed us. You know what I mean? And I think the beauty of being able to do that is now we can really address the topic with the level of intensity that it needs to be addressed in order for it to resonate versus us having to sugarcoat messages about sensitive topics, right? Yeah.
Nah, man, thank you very, very much for that. I've been watching it for many, many years. Like, man, comedians can say almost anything, and it's uncomfortable. We all thinking it, but they can like say it, and people
Mhm.
just like laugh or might, be uncomfortable in they see, but they won't really, really go at. But I mean, these days it's kind of different,
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
sensitive times right now. So they want to pick apart every little thing and
Mhm.
cancel culture. Do you ever get concerned about that whenever you're delivering your message? Do you concerned about responses and getting canceled or
No,
silenced?
no,
My
no.
man said no,
Yeah.
not at all.
Poetry is one of the last freedoms we have, right?
Yes,
You can go in your closet, you can almost wear what you want to wear, but if you go outside with the wrong thing on, you may catch problems. But poetry is one of the last pure freedoms that we have. And if
yeah,
we start adding self-imposed constraints to ourselves, now we're imprisoning ourselves. We're taking this thing that's free and we're putting shackles into it. So I'm not gonna create this self-imposed prison for myself because of what somebody else thinks about what I said. The only time that I'm cautious about that is if there's people who've been through like trauma, like sexual trauma,
yeah,
trauma with violence, and
yeah.
I'm cautious about what type of poems I share. I'm gonna say this real quick. I don't want to be too long-winded. When I'm in a training environment, they have care providers in those environments. Just in case somebody is triggered, they can go to that care provider. They can provide them with the care. So when they leave, they have a level head, right? When I throw a poem online and somebody listens to it in their room, there's no way for me to provide care. I might trigger them in a way that they go dive off a bridge. So I might not recite a poem about something that I know may be triggering in that way because I'm not close enough to provide care to the person who may be triggered. That's the only time I'm cautious. Other than that, no.
That's a wonderful answer. Actually, that's a wonderful answer, man. Is there any subject matter you haven't tackled yet, but you feel drawn to explore when the time is right?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, if I want to talk about it, I'm just going to talk about it. So if there's a subject that I want to talk about that I hadn't, you just ain't heard the poem yet.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah.
And with that being said, man, thank you very, very much for your time, my brother. Thanks to
Yeah.
anybody watching this in live time. Anybody watching on YouTube later on, man, drop some comments. I'll answer back as fast as I can. This has been a wonderful, amazing episode. As a fan and a fellow poet, man, thank you very, very much. Good luck in the studio tonight, man. Kill that studio session.
I appreciate that, man. That means a lot.
Yes, sir. Peace
Yeah.
and bless.
All right now.